Everybody hates women in gaming. I'm talking about the woke progressives and, of course, the diehard gamers. They each have their own faction of women that they dislike to see and appear in video games. And if you look at the content that we've been seeing now, there's a war being waged between these two factions to find the right type of woman to be representative of gaming. And I think that's the thing that we're ultimately seeing right now in the gaming industry, where we have these political activists that are trying to force feed gamers a type of woman that they don't want to see, and you have gamers rejecting any content that's trying to remove the things that they once loved about the gaming industry. And this is kind of a thought that we see forming now in the gaming industry, where we have strangely a uniting faction that dislike women in gaming. And it's kind of odd to see it develop and take shape over time between two factions that ultimately do have a lot of love for women. This seems to be the clear uniting line that we're seeing happening between the dividing factions in the game industry and, of course, the gamers themselves, where we have this unified dislike of certain kinds of women. Regardless if you're a person that supports progressive ideological policies that we see pervasive in the gaming industry, where games are made for political ends, there is a dislike from the people that support these ideas. And of course, there is a dislike for those type of women from gamers that are there just to play video games and are reminiscent of the games that came from the past that had an actual reverence and high regard for women, which ironically came during the era that a lot of people in the modern day gaming industry see as the most disrespectful time period for women, because women were represented by men that developed games. I think this is the dividing line that we're seeing right now between the new modern day gamers and game developers that want to see inspiration of women looking more like themselves, that appeal to their personal reflection upon themselves and society itself. And that's what we see with games coming out from these modern audience trends, where women are not idealized, where they are more unappealing, unattractive, and unlikable. And that's what we see from a whole host of games that come out nowadays. This absolute hatred of women that are the ideal for men. And I think that's the hatred that we're seeing develop in the gaming industry. And we have gamers from the past that love that idealized woman, and they're angry at this new version of women that we're seeing in the gaming industry. And it kind of devolves into an overall hatred for women across the board within the gaming industry, because you have one faction that wants only unappealing, unattractive women. You have one side that only wants attractive and appealing and idealized women. So you have hatred across all the boards, and this hatred is culminating with a game that is probably uniting both factions that absolutely love this indie title called Clair Obscur that brought together both factions subsequently, where everyone was praising this game. They were praising the women, they were praising the overall looks, the appeal, the models, the story, and the overall in-depth gameplay that brought in the gamers. And Clair Obscur is one of those titles that actually blew up and outsold its expectations, currently selling over 5 million copies. And this game itself brought both of those sides, the ones that like the idealized woman and the ones that want a more grounded and realistic woman in gaming. And both sides are now claiming this game as their own, as a progressive idealist and woke evangelist come out and say, hey, you guys that like the idealized woman, you hate this game. And they're listing all the games that have come out today, saying gamers hate women. And these are the type of arguments that we're seeing from these factions nowadays, where everyone is trying to claim every successful female title as their own. And of course, gamers themselves that are really into the classic style and idealized version of a lot of these characters in gaming, men or women, they're claiming these games as well. And I think there's this schism here that is being developed because a lot of the people involved in this argument are coming from different points of view. And I think this post on X is the best representative of that, because this person comes out and says, you can't stand women in video games this year. You sure sucked for you. And this is kind of a new age, modern day progressive thing. A person that probably doesn't play games probably supports this stance, saying, yeah, you guys that hate women dislike this year of gaming, even though a lot of these titles being shown here are perfectly acceptable and cheered on by most gamers. And I think this is the disconnect that we're seeing nowadays, because the people that have no understanding of gaming, that maybe just be game reviewers or game journalists, are coming out thinking that all gamers hate women, when in actuality, like I mentioned before, many gamers just want to see an idealized version of any human being in video games, because that's what gaming is for. We're there to escape and see a fantasy. And I think that's the thing that a lot of gamers are trying to express to these newcomers into the gaming industry. And the newcomers I'm talking about the consultancy firms, I'm talking about the journalists, I'm talking about the race protesters and activists that come out and try to establish themselves in gaming because they want to change gaming and make it reflective of their personal politics. I'm talking about the Sweet Baby Inks, the Black Girl Gamers, of course, the Hit Detections, all these gaming consultancy firms or investment banks like BlackRock that want to have their influence in the gaming industry because they want to change it to be more representative of their politics. And that's what we see with a lot of the elements that have come into the space of gaming, where they're there just to put their own ideological point into the gaming world. And that's why we see articles always bashing things that are not set or aligned with their personal identification of what gaming should be. And we have this with numerous articles bashing games with any idealized feminine form or body type because they don't want to see that. They want to see something that is more in line with their political ideology, where there is no pretty, there is no ideal. Everything is all the same and everything is ugly and equally as valuable, where there's no disparity between individuals. And I think this is the kind of socialistic, communistic ideology that we see at the forefront of a lot of progressive movements nowadays. And that's the thing that we see playing out in the video gaming industry these past few years, where it's taking down and stripping down the looks and appeals of a lot of these female characters, trying to bring them into the equitable distribution of looks. And that's what we see with characters when you have comparisons with games coming from the East and West, where you see this attempt to strip away the idealized look and attractive appeal of characters. And that's the dichotomy we see playing out in the Eastern games development world, where they're breaking away from the Western game thought pattern of doing this way. And that's why we have these characters that have come out from the East that look drastically different, because they are still running on the operating system that, hey, this is what gamers are interested in and we're going to give them what they want. And that's kind of flying in the face of the people that are saying that gamers hate women, because we do love women. If you have any history in gaming, you know all the iconic female characters that have graced the video gaming screen, because gamers have always had a like and passion for a lot of the women in gaming. And I think this is the thing that we see consistently throughout the history, but I think that's the thing that's lost on new gamers, new journalists, new consultancy firms. They haven't really played games. The only game they probably did play was Mario or Ping Pong, and they're coming here and saying, hey, you still haven't advanced from Mario and Ping Pong, even though I haven't played any other games. But that's probably your standard. And I think this is the small-mindedness that we're seeing from these modern-day gamers, because they're more activists than actually gamers themselves. They don't understand the history of gaming, where we have consistently had strong women in gaming. It's just not their type of strong women. These are women that look pretty, that are attractive, that are appealing, that are strong, that are likable. I think that's the thing. Gamers have a big problem, and that's why they have their own personal hatred for a lot of the women in current day gaming, because the current day gaming market is an expert at making unlikable women. And I think that's what we've been seeing for the past 10 years whenever it came to building a property centered around a female character. We know she's going to be a boss lady, annoying, unlikable, unappealing, and just unattractive as well. When you have all those combinations of things, you don't even want to make the character likable. What else do you have left? You don't want the personality to be good, let alone their looks. And I think that's the thing that we keep seeing in the gaming industry, where it's more focused on these political issues and identitarian issues, where they lose the plot and the story that they're producing. And that's why we have a whole list of titles coming out that are failing because of that. And you can see with Concord, Flintlock, Kill the Justice League, Dustborn, Star Wars Outlaws, they all have the same problems with their female characters, where they're beyond annoying, beyond idiotic, and more than anything, they have no coherent or likable trait about them. And that's what's the thing people have with Star Wars Outlaws. They just wanted to make a strong boss lady, and they lost the plot in making that game an actual solid, appealing franchise for the gamers. And I think this is the thing that is the dividing line for most gamers in the gaming industry itself, where the gaming industry wants a representation of their personal politics and ideals rather than something that is appealing to the masses, and the gamers themselves want something that looks cool. And I think when you do that, you actually bring in the gaming audience. And I think that's exactly what we see here with Clair Obscur, where it had all the elements that everybody loves, where it had likable characters. I liked all the female characters here. They weren't bossy, annoying. They're empathetic. They actually felt their feelings, and they didn't hate the male character because he was a male. The male character, he was competent. He wasn't a buffoon. He wasn't denigrated so he can uplift the women to the peak of their powers. It was more of a relatable story because the characters actually had a story to tell. I think that's the thing that brought in majority of gamers, where it wasn't solely dependent on their looks either, but their looks were good and they actually had some fan service with some of the characters having their own customable costumes that actually brought in the fan base. And I think that's the thing that we see now with this game itself, and that's why it's selling, and that's why both sides are cheering and claiming this game as their own, because it's just a good game. And I think that's the thing that's lost nowadays, especially with the modern day gaming industry, because at the forefront for them is never about good games, it's about activism. And I think when you look at Eastern games, yeah, there's some games that have good looking characters that are entirely useless, and the games themselves don't last long. I'm looking at Chu First Ascendant and some other titles coming out from Korea and China where they had forgettable games, but those games went on to success because they intrigued the gamers with their looks, their appeal, their idealization of the human form, the fantasy. And you look at some games came out from the West, it's more focused on their politics. And that's what we saw with Kill the Justice League and so much other titles these past few years. And I think that's the thing that is losing the plot for most gamers nowadays, and the gaming industry itself, where the gaming industry is falling out in line with its customer base because it's politicized. And I think that's the thing that we see right now driving this wedge, where everybody's hating some form of women, the uglified women of the modern day woke era of gaming, where all women have to look like masculine bullies. That's what we see with the most recent Call of Duty, Battlefield games. All of them have this ugly auntie energy that gamers are just not interested in, where we have boss lady, annoying musclehead, and kind of vindictive personalities at the forefront of all these games. And it's just not the thing that gamers are going to be attracted to. No human being is going to be attracted to it. But we see these as the main characters of most games. And I think that's the thing. That is the folly of the current day market of the gaming industry, where they just want to see themselves in gaming, and that is not what gaming is for. We see this subsequently with a lot of the titles that are coming out nowadays. We saw this with Spider-Man, where they just ripped the staff and put them in the game because they see themselves as the people that are idealized, and they want you to idolize themselves, and that is just not what gaming is about. We want to see things beyond ourselves, and that is the thing that seems to be lost in the modern day gaming industry. And that's why games that do the idealized version really bring in the gamers, and gamers don't hate them, and gamers matter the most. And I think this is the thing that we're seeing right now, where everybody hates some form of women in gaming, and I don't think it was always like that. I think before we had this modern activist version of the gaming industry, everybody loved women. And it seems like now that we have the activists, a lot of these feminist organizations and people that are trying to adopt and change the gaming industry, now we have a divide where at least 70% of the gaming industry hates the content that's coming out, and we have another 29% that doesn't care, and we have a 1% that absolutely despises the gaming industry. And it just so happens they run all the consultancy firms, they get all the backing from the investment banks, and they have all the journalists in their pocket. So this 1% of haters that are not even playing games are outweighing the 70% of gamers, and maybe 99% of gamers that do not care about this at all. And I think that is a situation that we're seeing play out in the gaming industry. Maybe you disagree with me. Tell me what you think. Everybody hates women in gaming. That seems to be the case so far, but it's changing, hopefully. And I think that's what we're hoping to see in the future of gaming. But tell me what you think. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.